Hi, I'm Matt and welcome to Less Dependent Wisconsin. Well, today's July 15th, 2023, and last year on July 15th I did a garden tour. So I'm going to keep that tradition up. I'm going to take you around the house, show you what's working in the garden, how my organic fertilizers are doing, some of the improvements I'm making, and some of the changes I'll be making for next year. So the goal of this video is to kind of show off, how things are going, but I also want to inspire you. These are things that you can do at your house with very little effort generally. You don't have to go as crazy as I do, but it is nice to grow things for yourself and become less dependent. So quite a bit to look at. Let's go get started. On the southeast corner of my house, last year I ripped up the lawn and planted clover. And as you can see, the clover is doing really good. It's definitely keeping the bees happy. And that's what I was going for. And behind that, I've got a little lily garden that I've started. I had about 6 pop up from last year, and then I planted another dozen, so this will keep filling in over time, but some very beautiful results. This was the Parker pear tree that we planted last year. The rabbits did not get to it, and this year we've actually got some fruit growing on it. I think I've got about a dozen pears on this tree, and maybe the same amount on the other tree. Which brings me to the other half of the front yard, the pumpkin patch and sunflower jungle. So the sunflowers are all volunteers. So here's another Kong hybrid. I did transplant these after I found them growing, but now this one is about 6 foot tall. I think I've got 5 or 6 of the sunflowers here, but the bases are just enormous. You see, several inches. So right next to that, or below it I should say, we've got our pumpkin patch, and the pumpkins are flowering. There's some of the male flowers, and you can see the female flowers with the little pumpkins growing on them. So this was only about a dozen pumpkin plants, but I trained the runners to grow in the directions I wanted, so it really filled in the yard nicely. Here's that Honeycrisp pear tree, and you can see some of the fruit on it. Now, unfortunately, this will be the last year I'm growing pumpkins, because next year I'm going to turn the front yard into a perennial pollinator garden. Some more permanent plants, and let's attract some more bees, hummingbirds, things like that. And the inspiration behind that are these perennials that I planted last year. And if you are just looking for a beautiful plant, this is bee balm. Okay, I got this, it came in a 2-gallon container and it just multiplied. I got 2 of them, but it just multiplied and will continue to multiply. You can separate bunches of it and replant it, but just amazing. And I've seen the hummingbirds and bees in here. Beautiful. Now this is the area right next to my driveway, but last year we had pumpkins growing here. Wasn't sure if I was going to do a new driveway this year or not, so I opted not to plant anything here. So I just dropped the last of my clover seeds, so that's all filled in. And we have a volunteer tomato plant in the front yard, so we're just going to let him go, starting to get some flowers on that. So as we come into the backyard, we've got our pumpkin garden here. I did pumpkins here last year too, but I did set it up a little differently this year. We are growing the pumpkins in straw only. And one thing you want to do, if you do see flowers growing on your potatoes like this, you want to pull them off. It's pretty simple. Just yank them off, because we do not want the potatoes to flower. We don't want that energy going into flowers. We want the potatoes to grow nice big potatoes. The one thing I did not foresee was that the potatoes would grow out the side of the fencing, but that's not a problem at all. So potatoes did really good. Now I planted my bucket potatoes a couple of weeks ahead of time, so these are getting towards the end of their lives. So these are going to start dying back, and then I'll be able to harvest my bucket potatoes probably sometime in the next 2 weeks would be my guess. So my rhubarb started out really good this year. Got a harvest, made some rhubarb crisp, but then they really didn't do so well. So I built kind of a mini retaining wall. It's almost done. I still need a few more bricks. So I'm hoping to get that soil amended, put it more of on an even slope. It seemed like a lot of water would just run off. So we hope they'll do a lot better next year. My strawberry patch did really good at the start of the season, but then the birds got to all the strawberries. So next year I'm going to have to come up with a better system. So right now we're just focused on plant development, letting the runners take off and make new plants. If you happen to catch the video that I made a few months ago, I made these raised garden beds for about 30 bucks each. They're out of cedar slab fence posts for six footers. So it turned out really well. If you do build these and you have a problem with it bowing out at the sides, you can do what I did and grab a 2x2 cedar, cut that down to 32 inches, and attach it to the sides, and it'll pull the sides in. So in this first bed here, we had beets. I've already harvested those and pickled them, and now we are getting a second crop of beets going. So they are just now starting to poke through the surface. These are my carrots. One thing I'm trying to do this year is keep the tops of them trimmed so they're less than 10 inches tall, and I'm hoping that will contribute to a better carrot growth. So right next to that we have volunteer tomatoes. So these are actually growing in the ground. These popped up in the raised bed. I was going to use this bed for something else, but that didn't pan out. I actually transplanted these 3. This was just a branch that I stuck in the ground. I thought that was dead, but now it is getting ready to produce flowers. And these are actually Roma tomatoes that I started from seed. They were the last of the ones from seed, so I just kind of threw them in here. And then in the last raised bed, we have jalapenos. And a little ladybug helping out. But they are doing good. They're getting ready to, they're flowering now, as you can see, and we've already got a few fruits developing. So this is going to be cowboy candy, and I'm hoping to make a lot of it this year. Going down from the raised beds, I've got beans growing along the fence, and they are growing up, and we are starting to get some flowers. Got a couple more volunteer tomato plants down here. And we've got beans and beans, another tomato, a big weed. Then we switched to peas, and the peas are actually doing really good. I just sampled some a bit ago. They're very sweet, so I'm probably going to get to pick some peas either today or tomorrow. So that's the fence line. The corn patch is definitely interesting. So I had some seeds left over from last year, but not nearly enough to do the whole patch. So I planted those in the first 2 rows and then ran to the hardware store to get 2 more packs for the last 4 rows. And they are just developing differently. These are still in their growth stage, not really ready to start producing. We're getting there. But then these are almost ready for pollination. Yeah, they're starting to drop some of those. The way this works is these drop onto the ears of corn, and that's how the kernels of corn get made. So I'm probably gonna have to do some hand pollination later this afternoon. And I'll definitely have to do hand pollination when it comes to these plants. Behind the corn patch, I've got 4 more raised beds. So I've got a total of 7 raised beds that I made this year. These are jalapeno plants. I recently went back to church for the first time in many, many years. Come out after Mass is over, and somebody was giving away free plants. So I took 4 of the jalapenos. They were in tiny little containers, but these guys have bounced back nicely and are putting out flowers and fruit. So right next to that, we've got some garlic growing. This is the first time I've ever grown garlic, so kind of seeing what happens there. I've got red and white onions rather, and they are starting to get a little bit of size to them. So I am doing something similar to the carrots. I am trying to keep the tops trimmed and see if that helps produce a bigger onion. Right behind that bed, we've got cucumbers that are coming up nicely, really starting to flower. Some tiny little fruits forming. I got these trellises from Menards for 15 bucks each. They seem to be working well. I had lettuce growing in between these, and now that lettuce is ready to harvest, so we're going to go ahead and get that picked. And then I've got some bunching onions that I've grown as well. These are the little pickling cucumbers, and these are the regular size cucumbers. So these are a little bit behind in the development. Did the same thing, got some lettuce growing there. If you saw the video that I made earlier, about a month ago, on making compost bins out of black plastic trash cans, I just added a 3rd one yesterday, but these are working really well. Take a peek what's going on inside. Lots of bugs, moisture. They're just crawling all over the sides of the trash can. So that compost experiment's working good. Right next to the compost bins, we have our bees. Now, these aren't the bees that I had last year. Unfortunately, those bees died in March. I think I know what happened, but I bought what is called a nuke, which is a 5-frame nucleus. It's got a queen, the drones, the worker bees, and it just gets your hive going a little faster. The bees last year did a lot of the work, so hopefully I do get some honey out of the hive this year. Last year I planted 3 blackberry bushes, and they came back. The guy at the nursery wasn't sure if they would, but they did. But they are kind of rough looking. But we do have flowers and berries getting ready to form, so I'm very excited about that. The raspberries, on the other hand, took off. I started with 3 plants last year, and I need to do a little more research into how raspberries grow. Maybe thin this out a little bit. But there is a reason I wanted to do this with this raspberry patch. And the reason is the bees. By having this patch like this, it forces the bees to fly out and up instead of flying directly out. So if you didn't have something kind of forcing them into the air, they would be flying out straight at waist level, basically. So that is one good advantage for this. But as you can see, some of the new ones are putting out some flowers and raspberries. So in this raised bed last year, I think I had beets, carrots, and onions. We're doing tomatoes this year, Roma tomatoes. And they have been doing really well. kind of an elongated tomato. But in that same pack, I had some seeds that were not Roma tomatoes. These are clearly round. Definitely not a Roma tomato. Maybe a cross with a Roma or something, but I've got a few plants like that. But all in all, these plants are producing well. Here's another one with the round tomatoes on them. Now, one thing next year is I'm going to take apart the logs on this and convert this into a more proper raised bed. So you might want to tune in to check that out. So we've got fish emulsion cooking over there. I've got biochar and a little bit of fish emulsion in one of those buckets. This was kind of a random wildflower garden that I started last year, and the flowers came back. A lot of them did. It's kind of looking a little haphazard now, but hopefully this gets stronger and looking better as the years go by. And then I did also plant some random cosmos seeds. One's getting ready to flower right there. Just threw these kind of back there because I had them left over. Now, last year I had planted 2 apple trees, and unfortunately in the winter the rabbits came and ate the bark off above the protective coat covering. So you got to imagine that covering's 2 foot tall, so that's how deep the snow was back here. And then the rabbits would sit here and eat all this bark. They ate it all the way around the tree, both apple trees. It basically killed them. So I had to plant a new apple tree here this year. Unfortunately, I had to put my dog Major down back in May, so he is buried underneath this apple tree. So this was kind of one of his favorite spots in the yard, and then I still need to replace the other apple tree. Now, last year I had corn planted here, and this year we are doing watermelon, and the watermelon is doing great. I've had flowers coming and going for the last week. Right now I'm looking at least 15 to 20 flowers. I've been feeding these guys a lot of compost tea, and then they really took off as a result of that. So hopefully I'm going to get some nice big watermelons this year. If you've ever wondered if you can grow the same crop in the same spot, here's the answer to that question: yes. You just have to amend the soil properly, give it all the nutrients the plants will need. But I did peppers here last year, and I'm doing peppers again this year, and they are just now starting to form some fruit. So these are bell peppers back here, and then I got peperoncini in the front, and they are flowering right now. So one of the things, we did have an earlier growing season this year. Everything I got into the ground was in basically the first week of May. We only had one night where it got down to 36 degrees after that. So I've had a little extra growing time this year. So just to update you on projects around the house, the greenhouse did get finished last year, but now I've got to learn to control the temperature. It got way too hot this year. I thought I killed my peppers and tomatoes. Fortunately, they bounced back. If you like to fish, I highly suggest getting this fish cleaning table. I think I got it from L&M Fleet Supply for 60 bucks. It hooks up to a garden hose. You can put a bucket underneath to collect the water, but it makes cleaning fish so much easier. I'm glad I got it. And then the other little project I did was I took all of my raised barrels and raised them off the ground with cinder blocks. Just makes filling the water jugs a lot easier. And it was basically a matter of just setting the concrete blocks in place and cutting the gutters down to size. Now, one other project I did this year was I refinished my deck, sanded it, cleaned it, stained it, waterproofed it, added some lattice work, and it came out really nice. So I think I will be doing a video showing you how I accomplished this. But the reason we're going up to the deck is to check on the container garden we started a couple of months ago. So we've got our dill, cilantro, marigolds, and basil. And then I had planted Roma seedlings that I had started. Now this is a good time to talk about the size of the container that you grow stuff in. This is only maybe 8 inches deep, so it did affect the height of these Roma tomato plants. They're only about 2.5 foot tall, but they are flowering and putting out fruit. So pretty successful little experiment here. Just an update on the worm farm. They are doing good. Feed them lettuce out of the garden. There's a few right there. They're doing really well. Lots for them to eat. And they should start multiplying soon. One other success I had this year was I built a few birdhouses, and I actually had a family of wrens move into this one. But if you can attract birds to your property, it's a great way to cut down on bugs. I would literally sit on the deck and watch them fly out, catch bugs, fly back, feed them to the babies, and repeat the process all day long. So I think this fall I am going to do a video showing you how I made these simple bird houses. So look forward to that. So that's it. The 2023 garden tour. I'm pretty happy with the way things are turning out. The garden's slowly developing over the years and will continue to keep looking better. I'm pretty confident my organic fertilizers that I'm making and using are really contributing to the success of the garden. If you're a subscriber to this channel, thank you very much. If you aren't a subscriber, please consider subscribing. But focus on being less dependent. We'll see you soon. Have a great day.